Have you ever looked up at a plane, that massive piece of engineering just soaring through the sky, and wondered what really keeps it up there? Not just the pilots, not just the fuel, but like decade after decade.
It's a great question.
Yeah, because today we're diving into something maybe less visible, but absolutely vital. It's the economic engine behind aviation safety itself: maintenance, repair, and overhaul. MRO, as they call it in the industry.
Exactly. It's this critical backbone, often unseen, that really ensures aircraft are safe, that they last, and that they perform at their best, all over the world.
And this deep dive feels really timely, right?
Oh, absolutely. We're looking at some fascinating data, particularly from Cognitive Market Research's Global Aviation MRO Market Insights and Forecasts. And it reveals a sector that's not just, well, essential, but it's seeing some truly explosive growth.
Explosive growth, okay.
Yeah. So we're going to explore the sheer scale of it, where it's heading, and importantly, what's really driving this constant, indispensable motion.
Okay, let's do it. Let's unpack this fascinating market. Let's find those nuggets of insight that really show how much the whole aviation world relies on this skilled, ongoing maintenance.
Right.
So, starting with the big picture, because the aviation MRO market, it's genuinely massive, a global enterprise.
It really is. Just think about the numbers. Back in 2021, global revenue was already over $78 billion.
$78 billion. Wow.
And it's not slowing down. It's expected to climb to nearly $94 billion by 2025.
Okay, so that's just next year.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But here's the really astonishing part. The projection for 2033 is forecast to soar past $133 billion.
Over $133 billion.
Yeah. And that reflects a steady compound annual growth rate, the CAGR, which kind of helps us see the consistent pace, right? It's coming in at around 4.5, maybe 4.6%.
Okay, 4.562% to be precise from the source. That's quite consistent growth over a decade.
It is. And what's fascinating, I think, is how these numbers, they're like a mirror reflecting the health and, the future path of global aviation itself.
Mm.
Well, this steady rise, it isn't just random. It points to some fundamental forces at play. We're seeing increasing demand for air travel globally, obviously.
Right, post-pandemic recovery and just general
What's
work.
it? Then there's the simple fact of aging aircraft fleets. Older planes just naturally need more intensive attention.
More work, yeah.
And on top of that, modern planes are incredibly complex.
Yeah.
These systems require really specialized, regular maintenance.
Yeah.
All these things together are directly driving these, frankly, impressive numbers.
So it's clear MRO isn't just like fixing things when they break.
Not at all. It's really about enabling the entire future of air travel. It's proactive. It's essential.
Okay, so those global numbers are definitely impressive. But you mentioned the regional breakdown adds another layer. That's where it gets really interesting, seeing where this growth is actually taking flight.
Absolutely. And leading the pack by quite a margin, actually, is the Asia-Pacific region,
Oh.
APAC. It's not only the largest chunk of the market, but it's also the fastest growing. Think about this.
Yeah.
Its market size is projected to almost double. It was just over $31 billion in 2021.
$1 billion.
Yeah, and it's expected to hit over $57 billion by 2033. That's growing at a really robust 5.14% CAGR.
Wow, over 5%. Why such strong growth there?
Well, it's fueled by several things: a booming middle class across many countries, meaning more people flying, and also a huge surge in new low-cost carriers.
Right, LCCs.
Exactly. So this rapid rise, it's not just about market size. It feels like a fundamental shift. Global aviation's center of gravity is moving. They're really building the future of air travel over there right now.
And drilling down within APAC, China is obviously huge.
Dominant force, yeah. China's projected growth is also strong, around 5.3% CAGR, going from about $9 billion in 2021 to over $17 billion by 2033.
But you said keep an eye on India.
Definitely. India is being called the next growth engine. It boasts a really high CAGR, nearly 5.9%. It's expanding from roughly $5 billion to almost $10 billion in that same time frame.
Almost doubling, too. Interesting. And Singapore?
Singapore is also showing very solid growth, around 5.6% CGR. But interestingly, the fastest growing sub-region within APAC is actually Southeast Asia.
Oh, really?
Yeah, collectively, countries there are expanding at almost 6% TGR, from about 1.6 billion to over 3.1 billion. It just paints this picture of really dynamic change across the whole region.
Okay, so APAC is clearly the hot spot. Let's shift focus a bit. What about North America? A more mature market, right? But still significant.
Absolutely significant. A major contributor. North America accounted for over $21 billion back in 2021.
$21 billion, okay.
And it's expected to reach nearly $34 billion by 2033. The growth rate is a bit slower, around 3.9% CAGR, but the base is huge.
And within North America, the U.S. obviously dominates the numbers.
Yeah, the U.S. makes up the bulk of it, about $18 billion in 2021, projected to hit over $28 billion. Its CAGR is around 3.8%.
But interestingly, the report highlights Canada having a higher growth rate, around 4.9%. And Mexico's pretty healthy too, at over 4%.
That's right. It's a really interesting point.
It does raise a question, doesn't it? Like, why would Canada's growth rate be higher? Maybe less saturated than the U.S. market, or perhaps a different strategic focus. What do you think?
That's a great observation.
Yeah.
I mean, the U.S. has this massive established fleet, right? So it requires enormous amounts of continuous maintenance, hence the large base value.
Okay.
But Canada's higher CAGR, it might indicate a stronger relative push perhaps into fleet modernization,
Yeah.
maybe driven by specific regional carriers or strategic investments in newer aircraft types that need specialized MRO right from the start.
Ah, so different dynamics even within a mature market.
Exactly. It shows how even established markets have their own unique drivers, leading to these, varied growth patterns. It's not one size fits all. Got it. Okay, let's cross the Atlantic. Europe, still a very substantial market, I assume.
Very much so. Europe's MRO market was around $15.7 billion in 2021.
$15.7 billion.
And it's projected to hit over $25 billion by 2033. That comes out to a steady CGR of just over 4%, 4.088%.
And who leads the way in Europe?
Germany leads the European market, projected to grow at about 4.8% CAGR. Following Germany, you have strong contributions from the UK, France, Italy, and Spain.
Okay, the big players.
Right. And the report also acknowledges other countries, Russia, Sweden, Switzerland. They all maintain steady, if slightly lower, growth rates, generally between sort of 2.6 and 4.5%. It reflects that mature but still evolving aviation infrastructure across the continent.
Okay. And quickly touching on other key regions, South America.
South America shows promising expansion. It's forecast to grow from about $4.6 billion in 2021 to nearly $8.2 billion by 2033. That's a CGR of almost 4.9%.
Quite strong. Any standouts there?
Brazil is the top contributor in terms of sheer size, expected to go from about $1.8 billion to over $3 billion. But interestingly, Argentina actually boasts the highest growth rate in the region, close to 5.4% CAGR.
Interesting. And the Middle East? Lots of big airlines and hubs there.
Exactly. Strong emerging growth. The Middle East is projected to go from about $3.4 billion to nearly $6 billion by 2033. That's a solid 4.8% CAGR.
And within that?
The UAE shows particularly fast growth, over 5.3% CAGR, which makes sense given the huge airline investments there. Turkey's also strong at over 5%. Saudi Arabia shows steady expansion too. It reflects those big investments in new airlines and expanding travel hubs.
Makes sense. And finally, Africa.
Africa is starting from a smaller base, around $1.9 billion in 2021.
Okay.
But it's definitely on an upward trajectory, projected to reach nearly $3.3 billion by 2033. That's a CAGR of about 4%.
And any particular country leading the growth there?
South Africa stands out with a growth rate of about 4.5%, so developing potential across the continent.
Okay, so we've seen these, frankly, huge numbers, these regional shifts. APAC booming, North America and Europe steady giants, other regions growing fast. Let's connect the dots. What are the fundamental forces driving all this MRO expansion globally? What's really behind the scenes powering these figures?
Right, it boils down to a few key things the source highlights.
Mm-hmm.
First, there's just a global push towards fleet expansion and modernization. Airlines are buying new planes, but also keeping older ones flying longer, sometimes.
Okay.
Then, a really crucial factor is the post-pandemic aviation recovery. As travel bounces back strongly, planes are flying more, and that simply means more maintenance is needed.
Makes perfect sense.
We're also seeing the increasing presence of low-cost carriers, the LCCs we mentioned. They often start with younger, standardized fleets, which might seem like less MRO initially,
Right.
but they expand rapidly. And over time, as those fleets grow and age, they generate significant MRO demand. Plus, there are massive investments happening globally in airport infrastructure.
Better airports mean more flights.
Exactly. It facilitates more air traffic, which naturally means more wear and tear, more maintenance cycles. And then, of course, there's that inescapable reality we touched on. Aging aircraft fleets. Older planes just need more work, period.
So if we really connect this to the bigger picture,
It becomes clear, doesn't it? MRO isn't just, fixing planes in a hangar somewhere. It's fundamentally enabling the entire future of global air travel. It underpins the expansion, the recovery, everything.
You mentioned aging fleets as a driver. Does that change the type of MRO work needed? Is it shifting from, say, routine checks to more complex stuff like structural repairs?
Oh, absolutely. That's a critical point. As planes age, the MRO work inherently becomes more complex.
How so?
Well, you move beyond the more routine line maintenance or regular checks. You get into deeper structural inspections, finding potential fatigue or corrosion. You're doing major component overhauls, engines, landing gear, avionics, sometimes even significant modifications or upgrades to keep the aircraft compliant or efficient.
And that must have implications for the workforce, right?
Huge implications.
Hmm.
This demands a really highly skilled workforce. It's not just mechanics turning wrenches anymore, though that's still vital. You need aerospace engineers, specialized technicians who understand composites or advanced diagnostics, NDT specialists,
NDT.
non-destructive testing, ways to inspect materials without damaging them. So it implies this growing need for specialized talent and advanced training programs within the industry.
Right.
That skills pipeline is actually a major factor baked into these market projections. It's not just more work. It's different, more complex work.
Oh, okay. So it's really clear then. As aviation traffic keeps picking up, as global fleets expand in age, these vital MRO services, maintenance, repair, overhaul, they're just going to remain absolutely critical, essential for safe, efficient, and hopefully sustainable air travel.
Couldn't agree more.
It really is a reminder, isn't it? Every single flight you take is backed by this massive, complex, sophisticated industry that most of us rarely even think about.
Yeah, it's mostly invisible until it's needed. And maybe a final thought to leave people with, building on all this. Given this immense scale, this constant growth of the aviation MRO market,
Mm.
what are some of the deeper implications we haven't fully explored?
Like what?
Well, think about global supply chain resilience, for instance. MRO needs a vast, complex network of parts and components flowing smoothly. What happens when that's disrupted?
Good point.
Or what about the future of aerospace engineering talent? We talked about needing specialized skills. How do we attract, train, and retain that next generation to handle even more complex aircraft?
Yeah, the skills gap is often talked about.
And even think about the environmental sustainability angle. With older aircraft, how does MRO contribute? Does it keep them viable and efficient for longer, which might be good in some ways? Or at what point does it become more sustainable overall to actually retire them and bring in newer, more fuel-efficient models? These are big, complex questions tied into this MRO growth.
Really interesting questions. Definitely something to ponder next time you look up at the sky. Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're exploring a really critical part of aviation that often flies under the radar. Maintenance, repair, and overhaul, or MRO for short.
That's right.
It's basically the hidden force keeping our skies safe. So our mission today is to unpack what MRO actually is, why it's, so vital, and also what's driving its huge growth, the challenges it faces, and maybe some of the cool new innovations reshaping it. We've gathered insights from quite a few sources to give you a really clear, hopefully engaging picture.
Absolutely. And at its heart, MRO is really this whole ecosystem that, quite literally, keeps the global aviation industry safe
Right.
and efficient and just plain operational.
Right.
It's the backbone, making sure every single fleet, commercial jets, cargo planes, you name it, meets those incredibly tough standards needed to stay airborne.
Okay, so let's get into what's actually fueling this huge market.
Right.
What are the big forces driving MRO growth right now?
Well, a primary one is simply the increase in the global fleet size. More planes, and alongside that, the surge in air traffic. Commercial airlines, cargo operators, they're all expanding their fleets pretty rapidly.
To meet demand, right. Passenger numbers, logistics.
Exactly. Growing passenger volumes, huge logistics demands. But it's not just more planes, it's also how much they're flying. Aircraft utilization rates, they're at all-time highs. Less downtime on the ground.
Wow, so they're working harder.
Much harder. And that constant operation puts, well, immense stress on components. So MRO shifts from being just a cost to a really critical proactive investment for airlines. It helps them prevent these massive multi-million-dollar disruptions.
It's a lot of sense. Okay, so more planes, flying more hours. What else is creating this, sustained demand for MRO?
Another really significant driver is the very strict safety and regulatory standards globally.
You mean like the FAA and others?
Precisely. We're talking authorities like the FAA Federal Aviation Administration in the U.S., EASA in Europe, and the global body, ICAO. And these aren't just suggestions. These regulations mandate routine inspections, component replacements, system certifications, all to maintain what's called aircraft airworthiness.
So airlines have to do it.
They absolutely have to. And this requirement forces them to work closely with certified MRO providers.
Yeah.
The ones with the specific capabilities and the approvals needed for full compliance.
Okay. And speaking of those specialized capabilities, I know in lots of industries, companies are leaning more on outside partners for technical stuff. Is that happening in MR too?
Oh, definitely. That's a major trend. We're seeing a significant increase in airlines outsourcing their MRO services.
Why is that? Cost.
Cost is part of it, yeah.
Yeah.
But crucially, it's also about accessing specialized technical expertise, stuff that's maybe really hard or just too expensive to keep in-house.
Gotcha.
So this strategic move lets airlines focus on their main job, like scheduling flights, optimizing
The
routes.
core operations.
Exactly. While they benefit from the efficiency, the scalability, and just the deep technical know-how that experienced MRO vendors bring to the table.
Okay, so we've got these strong forces pushing MRO forward. Growth, regulations, outsourcing. But every industry hits turbulence, right?
Yeah.
What are some of the biggest hurdles or challenges these MRO companies are dealing with now?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the really pressing challenges is just the sheer amount of capital investment needed to set up or even just expand MRO facilities. This isn't cheap.
What kind of costs are we talking?
Well, think about building specialized hangars big enough for modern jets, buying really advanced tooling for specific aircraft models, and then the intensive training needed for technicians. All of that adds up to, well, significant upfront costs and ongoing spending, too.
So big money needed up front. You mentioned technicians. What about the people side, the workforce? Any challenges there?
Well, that's a critical point, too. There's a pretty serious global shortage of skilled labor, specifically experienced engineers and certified mechanics. It's not just any labor, it's highly specialized talent.
And that causes
Eight
problems.
problems. This shortage really limits the industry's capacity to meet the rising demand for services. It creates bottlenecks in the repair cycles, which ultimately slows down how quickly aircraft get back in the air.
Right. Turnaround times suffer. Okay, so internal costs and labor are tough. What about external economic factors? How do they impact MRO?
Well, the economic volatility of the aviation industry itself is a major constraint. It always has been. Think about fluctuating oil prices, geopolitical instability, global recessions. These things can hit airline profitability hard and fast.
And when airlines tighten their belts.
Exactly. What we often see during downturns is carriers might delay maintenance that's not absolutely essential right away, or they might opt for, say, temporary fixes just to cut immediate costs.
Okay.
And that behavior directly slows down demand for MRO services. It causes revenue to fluctuate across the whole sector. It's quite cyclical.
Got it. So assuming the money's there, the people are there. What about just the logistics? Getting the right parts to the right place at the right time. That sounds complicated.
Oh, it is. That brings us neatly to supply chain management challenges. These are constantly impacting MRO efficiency. There's this relentless need for just-in-time spare parts. You can't have too much inventory, but you absolutely need the part when you need it.
Tricky balance.
Very tricky. Plus, you have to comply with all the different standards from the OEMs, the original equipment manufacturers like Boeing or Airbus. And then there's the incredibly intricate logistics involved in moving parts across international borders. Customs, shipping.
So delays are a killer.
Absolutely. Any delay or disruption in that complex chain could be a manufacturing issue, could be a customs holdup. It severely impacts those turnaround times and service schedules. And that, in turn, hurts airline operations and ultimately customer satisfaction.
Okay, so we've navigated the headwinds, the challenges. Let's shift gears and look forward. What are the really exciting cutting-edge trends or tech advancements that are changing aviation MRO?
Yeah, this is where it gets really interesting. A truly transformative trend is the rise of predictive maintenance. This is powered by IoT, the Internet of Things, and big data analytics.
How does that work exactly? Sensors on the plane?
Precisely. Airlines and MRO companies are putting real-time sensors directly onto aircraft systems. Engines, landing gear, hydraulics. These sensors continuously monitor key health parameters, think temperature, vibration, fluid levels, and they transmit that data.
So you know before something breaks.
That's the goal. It allows for proactive servicing, replacing parts before they fail unexpectedly, based on real data, not just a schedule. This minimizes unplanned downtime, which is huge for airlines. It reduces maintenance costs significantly and dramatically improves overall aircraft availability and, of course, safety. It's moving from fixing broken things to preventing breaks.
That sounds like a massive leap, a real game changer.
It really is.
And with planes and their parts getting, well, more and more complex, are we seeing MRO services also getting more specialized?
Definitely. That's another key trend, the expansion of highly specialized engine and component level MRO. Aircraft engines especially are incredibly sophisticated now and incredibly expensive. So there's a rising demand for MRO providers who have really deep, almost, surgical technical capabilities for specific components.
So niche experts.
Exactly. Companies are investing heavily here. They're forming partnerships directly with the OEMs, acquiring advanced repair technologies, all designed to handle these high-value, complex parts with extreme precision and efficiency.
Makes sense. And finally, what about streamlining the day-to-day, getting rid of the old paper trails? How's tech helping there?
Oh, without a doubt. There's a very strong push toward digitalization,
Yep.
paperless MRO platforms.
Like apps and stuff.
Yep. Think mobile apps that mechanics use right there on the hangar floor. Cloud-based documentation systems, so records are accessible anywhere, instantly. Digital work orders that track every single step of a repair in real time. These tools are streamlining operations across the board, both for that quick line maintenance at the gate and the more involved base maintenance in the hangar. It's not just reducing the admin burden, which is great, but also seriously enhances compliance tracking, cuts down on human errors, and really speeds up those service turnaround times.
Wow. This deep dive has really shown just how dynamic this aviation MRO market is. It's clearly such a critical pillar for aviation safety, for performance, especially with the global fleet growing and all this new tech coming online so fast.
Absolutely. And, given that increasing sophistication of aircraft, the rise of predictive maintenance we talked about, and this accelerating push for digitalization, it raises a really interesting question for you to think about. How might the essential skill sets, the actual skills needed for MRO professionals, how might those evolve in the very near future? And what does that mean for the next generation of the workforce that ultimately keeps us all flying safely?
That's a great thought to end on. Really makes you think. Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the world of aviation MRO. We hope you'll keep exploring and maybe apply some of this newfound knowledge